Something about the house did not seem right to Emily. When they arrived, she felt as if there was something hiding inside the house that did not want to be found. Emily stopped in the middle of her step when she heard voices in her head. They repeated her name over and over again and did not stop. She wondered if they shouldn't have moved to New York. Something about the house did not seem right to Emily. When they arrived, she felt as if there was something hiding inside the house that did not want to be found. The house they move into was the biggest house they have ever moved into. It probably had at least 100 rooms. There were several floors and a huge front and backyard. Even though it was a huge house, there was only one kitchen on the first floor. Emily found that strange, but she pushed the thought away since they were a family of 3 and only needed one kitchen. However, even though they were a small family, she questioned why they were moving into a big house. Anna fumbled with the key and placed it in the keyhole. It was a small golden key with 2 letters on it, ND. She wondered what they stood for. When the door opened, Anna and Sam walked inside and did not bother to wait for Emily. Emily was always a worrier. She never stopped worrying. Her mom had said that. That was her greatest quality about her, although it was also her worst. It stopped her from doing things she wanted to do. In fact, it was Emily's idea in the first place to move to the mansion to let her mother settle in. Emily sucked in her breath and said, "This might be a bad idea to move into this house." Anna turned around and tilted her head to the side. The 2 girls were very confused about why Emily thought this. Emily's sister, Sam, rolled her eyes and said, "Emily's worrying again. She'll be fine after we have stayed in this house for a week." Emily shook her head, objecting the comment Sam made. Sam and Emily used to be very close until Sam entered high school. They used to do everything together. Then Sam made new friends and began ditching Emily so that she could go to parties. Anna gave Sam a warning look and said, "I thought you liked the idea of moving into a mansion." Emily shuffled side to side on her feet and glanced down at the floor. She stuffed her hands in her jean pockets and avoided eye contact with her family. There was just something that did not feel right. She felt a tug that made her want to move back to California. She did not like the voices inside her head. It did seem like an adventure at first to move into a huge house, but now that they were there, she thought otherwise. "Well, I'm just going to miss my friend," said Emily. Emily only had one friend in California. Since she was different from the others in her class, no one wanted to be friends with her. Although one person always backed her up when she would get in trouble for something she did not do. He was always there for her, and she would miss him a lot. "Yeah, right, Emily. I'm sure there is another reason why you don't want to move here," said Sam. Emily glared at Sam and said, "That's the only reason why, Sam. Why don't you believe me?" "Girls, that is enough," said Anna. Emily and Sam glared at each other while Anna was talking. Emily hated not being close with Sam anymore. She hated how high school did this to her. "We'll stay here for a week, and if Emily still wants to move, we will," said Anna. Emily nodded in agreement. Sam scoffed, spun around on her heels, and walked inside. Emily blushed and followed Sam inside. They used to do everything with each other. She wondered why high school changed her. She heard high school changed everyone, and she did not like that. When Emily walked inside, the voices came back. She stopped walking and looked around, wondering who said her name. Anna walked into the kitchen while Sam walked upstairs, probably choosing a room. Emily was frightened. She did not like hearing the voices in her head. She wanted to move, but she had to stay there for a week. The only reason why they moved was because Anna got a book deal and had to meet with her agent in New York. If she wouldn't have got that book deal, then they would have stayed in California. When Emily walked into the kitchen, Anna said, "Why don't you find a room and unpack?" Sam nodded and had another bite of her pizza. For the rest of dinner, she avoided eye contact with anyone. Emily, on the other hand, did not like middle school. Her teachers hated her for some reason. She was the student who got in trouble the most for not doing anything. She would get detention and would have to do extra homework, and she did not know why. Perhaps it was because of her dyslexia. People made fun of her because of that, and her teachers wanted her to fail school, so they made it extra hard for her to pass. Emily wondered why they hated her because of her dyslexia, though. She hated feeling different and wished she was just normal. Aside from moving into a strange home, she was glad to be moving into a new school. Sam set her pizza down, got up from the table, and walked upstairs. Emily frowned and looked at her mom. Anna looked like she was going to cry. Ever since their dad left them, it had been very hard to get a job and to keep Sam happy. Sam was very close to their dad, and when he left one night after someone died in California, she became depressed and stayed in her room. She did not eat or sleep and would only come out for school. At school, she did her best to hide her depression, and when she came home, she stayed in her room. Both Emily and Sam missed their father. However, he was not a very good husband to Anna. He had hit her once in the past and went out to bars every night. This all happened in the year 2008. Since then, things have been different. Emily sighed and said, "May I be excused?" Anna nodded and said, "Yes, you may. Be ready for school tomorrow." "Okay, Mom." Emily kissed her mom and went upstairs. She decided to live in the room next to Sam's. Since it was a big house, she did not want to be alone. Emily walked inside, turned on the light, and closed the door behind her. It was exactly like Sam's room, except a picture hung above the bed. It was a picture of a 6-year-old girl playing with her toys. She wore a cute dress, and her hair was curled and hanging over her shoulders. She had a huge smile on her face. She played with her dolls. Emily noticed that when she turned on the light, it was red rather than yellow. She wondered why it was red. When she entered, Emily found a light switch hanging on the ceiling and tugged on it. When the lights came on, she screamed when she saw a bat fly out of a corner. Just like Sam's bedroom, there were cobwebs and mold everywhere. There were spiders hiding in the corner and eating flies. There were shelves everywhere with books in them, and there were also at least 10 vanities. One vanity stood out to her, though. It was the simplest one of the others she saw. It was a brown-colored one with only 4 drawers and a rectangle mirror. She walked over to it and sat down on the wiggly bench. She looked at one of the drawers and decided to open it. Inside, she saw a small brown package and picked it up. She wondered if she would get in trouble for opening something she found that was not hers. Emily's head lifted up when she heard Anna call them down for dinner. She hid the package under her shirt and ran back downstairs. As she ran past Sam's bedroom, she bumped into her. Emily looked up at Sam and said, "Sorry. What's up with you?" asked Sam. Emily shrugged her shoulders and they both walked downstairs. When they entered the kitchen, they smelled the delicious smell of fresh baked pizza. They both smiled at each other and raced to the table. Sam got to the table first and sat down next to their mother. Emily sat across from Sam. Anna smiled and said, "Dig in." Sam took a slice of pizza and so did Emily. She ate a bite of the pizza and closed her eyes, inhaling the smell and enjoying the taste. Anna let out a breath and said, "Sam and Emily, tomorrow will be your first day of school. Sam, I want you to behave yourself. You have been getting into trouble lately at school when we were in California. This is your last year in high school, so please be the best person you can be." Emily wondered what trouble she had gotten into at her old school. She thought Sam loved her school. She was very popular and had 2 closest friends. Everyone admired her and wanted to be like her. She was probably the leader of the popular group at her school. Why would she be getting into trouble? Emily nodded and walked upstairs. She could never argue with her mom. No matter how much she wanted to move, she couldn't yell at her. Anna's childlike features made it impossible for people to hate her. Her mom had a small nose, round brown eyes, and curly brown hair. She had long piano fingers. Emily watched Sam as she threw open
Emily
a door
looked
and
exactly
walked
like
in a
her
room.
mother, while Sam inherited
Sam
her
looked
looks
around
from their
and took in
father.
every detail of the room.
She had blonde hair,
Emily followed
blue eyes,
Sam
and olive
inside
skin.
and noticed that everywhere
Although
she
she had
stepped,
early
the
hair
floors
and was
creaked.
small like her
The room
mother.
definitely needed a makeover. From the rain, the wood was damp, and she saw mold on the walls. It smelled old and looked that way too. The bed was in the back left corner of the room, and it had only one window at the far end of the room. There were cobwebs in the corners of the ceiling, which scared Emily. The floors were made of brown wood and the walls were palleted dark purple. The bed sheets were a boring brown color, and the pillowcases were white. However, they were not a clean white, they were dirty and covered with stains. "I think I'll have this bedroom," said Sam. Emily did not like the room. It was moldy and unsanitary. She thought that Sam should look around a bit more before deciding on what room she should have. Plus, someone could get sick from the mold. "What do you think, Emily?" asked Sam. Emily gave a small smile and walked out of the room. When she exited the room, she heard the voices again. She followed the voices, which lead her up multiple staircases and down narrow hallways. The hallways held black and white pictures of couples, each from a different generation. She wondered if they all lived in the mansion. As she walked, she thought she heard the voices say her name. She wondered how they knew her name, and why they were repeating over and over again. It seemed like an eternity had passed until the voices stopped, and she realized that she was on the top floor of the house. Emily saw a Sirius hanging down on the ceiling and pulled on it. A ladder fell from the ceiling and she gasped when it came down with a loud bang. She looked around before deciding to climb up and see what was in the room. She walked over to the bed and saw a small shape carved in the wood of the bed. It was a David star shape. She wondered why there was a David star at the foot of the bed. Emily shivered and walked out of the room. Why did they have to leave California? At first it was a good idea, but then she thought differently. Emily stood in front of Sam's room and hesitated before deciding to walk in. She wanted to be with Sam that night and see if she was okay. She looked guilty downstairs, and Emily wanted to make sure if she was okay. Sam looked at Emily and said, "I should put a sign that says, 'No freshmen allowed.'" Sam sat up from her bed and dangled her legs over the edge. She smiled at Emily and gestured for her to come sit next to her on the bed. Even though it seemed like she hated Emily, Emily knew deep down inside that Sam loved her. Emily wished it were like 14 years ago when Sam and her were really close. Sam would take good care of her sister and would protect from any harm. Now she allowed Emily to do whatever she liked and did not mind one bit. Emily leaned against Sam and said, "What if people don't like me?" Sam looked at Emily and shook her head. "They will like you. Do not tell yourself that. Everyone hated me at my old school," argued Emily. "That was your old school and it sucked. Trust me, people will like you. You are a likable person if they give you a chance." Emily smiled and looked down at the ground. Sam sighed and said, "Would you like to sleep with me tonight?" Emily nodded and they lay down next to each other on the bed. Emily curled up in Sam's arms to get herself warm. Sam let out a breath and said, "Tomorrow will be a new day." Anna pulled up into a parking spot at the school and parked her car. She unlocked the doors and soon enough Sam had already left the car and gone inside. Emily guessed Sam did not want to be associated with them in any way. She was probably humiliated by their blue minivan car that hadn't been cleaned since August. This was Emily's first year at a high school. Anyone would be lucky to go to a school in New York. Emily did not feel very happy in New York. She missed her best friend Noah, who was always there for her. Now she had to start new and create a good reputation. If people see any of her flaws, she would not know what to do. Anna sighed and said, "Do you want me to walk you in?" Emily smiled and said, "I'll be fine. I'm 14, I should be able to do things on my own. If I need anything, I'll ask Sam." Emily hugged her mom and quickly walked out of the car. She swung her backpack on her shoulders and walked inside with her head high. As she walked inside, someone tripped her and she fell onto the floor. She groaned and got herself up. Emily ignored the person laughing and walked inside the office. Emily was determined that this was going to be a good school year, and it would be different. Emily cleared her throat, and a man at the desk looked up at her and said, "What do you need, miss?" Emily smiled and said, "I would like my schedule, please." "Your name?" "Emily Dunn." The man coughed and looked through his files. His dark hair covered his eyes while he looked down at the papers in the gray drawers. He pulled out one sheet of paper and gave it to her. Emily attempted to read her schedule, but frowned, feeling defeated. The words danced around on the pages and did not stand still. Letters would change and the words got scrambled up. The man raised an eyebrow and said, "Do you need help finding your classes, Miss Dunn?" Emily blushed and nodded. She hated getting help from people. Hopefully this person would not find out that she had dyslexia. That would be embarrassing. She wished she could do things on her own. That would be a dream come true. But because she had dyslexia, she needed help with reading and finding places. She doubted she would be able to drive because of it. The man at the desk picked the office phone and punched in some numbers. Emily wondered if Sam would come to help her. She'd rather have Sam help her than anyone else. Sam was the only person she knew and was comfortable to be around, even though it seemed like Sam hated her. Emily turned her head when she heard the door open. She frowned when she saw that it wasn't her sister. A boy with blonde hair and blue eyes entered the office. He had his hands in his jean pockets. His shoulders were hunched over, and he held no expression on his face. He just stood there blankly and did not say anything. He wore a white V-neck shirt, which made his blue eyes pop out. He was skinnier than the people she had seen at the school. Emily looked at the man for confirmation about the boy. She had not been formally introduced and wanted a name. "This is Shane. He will be in your classes for the rest of the year, so he will help you around." Emily thanked him, and they both walked outside. When they turned around the corner of the office, they stared at each other without speaking. Shane looked at her and did not seem to blink. She wondered what was wrong with him, and why he wasn't showing her the classes she was supposed to go to. Shane leaned against the wall and said, "What's your first class?" Emily jumped when she heard him speak. She looked at the paper and tried to read what her first class was. She sighed and said, "I don't know." Shane raised an eyebrow and said, "Do you know how to read?" Emily blushed and said, "I have dyslexia. Strike one." Emily thought. Shane nodded and said, "That explains it." He snatched the paper from her hand and read the first class. Emily objected and started to argue with him until he held up a finger. She began wondering how Sam was doing. Was she able to find all of her class? Did she need help finding her classes? Emily doubted she needed any help, but that did not stop her from worrying about it. Emily shook her head. She was so annoyed from worrying about everything, she needed to stop doing that. Shane gave her back the paper, spun around on his heels and walked forward. Emily ran to catch up with him. He was unusually fast. He could probably go on the cross-country team if he wanted to. A few minutes later, they entered a classroom. There were only 2 seats left in the room, and they were both right next to each other in the middle of the room. A boy with brown hair and blue eyes cupped a hand around his mouth and said, "Is this your new girlfriend?" All of the students began to laugh at his ridiculous comment. Shane sighed and walked over to one of the 2 empty seats. Emily looked at the man standing in front of the class. He wore a white long-sleeve shirt with a black vest over it and a blue tie. He had dark curly hair and dark skin. The man rolled his eyes and said, "My name is Mr. Blake. Welcome to English class." The boy with blue eyes laughed while Mr. Blake spoke. Emily wanted to know what his problem was. He must have thought that he was the center of the world. Mr. Blake sighed and held out his hand. Emily shook his hand and said, "I'm Emily. Nice to meet you, Emily. There is an empty seat next to Shane." Mr. Blake pointed to Shane, who avoided eye contact with him. The only person he looked at was Emily. His eyes were glued to hers while she walked to her seat. Emily could feel her heart beat faster and faster every minute she sat next to him. Emily was unable to pay attention to the lecture because of Shane. Emily sighed in relief when the bell rang. When she got up from her desk, she tripped over a foot and fell on her floor. She grunted in pain and turned on her back to see who had tripped her. Of course, it was the boy who laughed earlier while she was speaking with Mr. Blake. "Loser," said the boy. Emily frowned and looked at the ground. She wondered why that boy continually insulted her. "Come on, Eric. Stop being mean to the poor girl. She just moved here," said Shane. Though no anger showed on his face, his voice said otherwise. He was quite scary when he was annoyed. However, Emily thought it was nice to see some emotion in him. Shane sighed and got up from his seat. He held out his hand and Emily took it hesitantly. Eric smirked at her as she got up and walked out of the classroom. Once they had walked a couple of feet away from the classroom, Shane turned around and said, "Give me your schedule." Emily did not like that he did not ask for the schedule, he just demanded it. Emily sighed and gave him the schedule. He took it and read the schedule again. Shane walked ahead and entered into the next classroom. Emily sighed and followed him. "What class is this?" asked Emily when she caught up with Shane. "Math." Emily nodded and walked up to the teacher at the front of the desk. The woman who was at the front had short blonde hair that reached to her chin. She had blue eyes, white skin. A gold ring wrapped around her left ring finger, letting everyone that she was married. She wore a blue dress that hung down at her ankles. Emily thought she was very pretty. "What's your name?" asked the teacher. "I'm Emily." "Nice to meet you, Emily. My name is Mrs. Davis. Please take a seat next to Ginger." Mrs. Davis pointed to a girl with red hair and blue eyes in the back. Emily nodded and sat down next to Ginger. Mrs. Davis handed Emily an Algebra 1 textbook and walked back to the front of the room. Emily noticed that Mrs. Davis had a British accent. "I might actually enjoy math this year," thought Emily. An hour later, the school bell rang, and everyone got up from their seats and left the classroom. Shane, however, was the only still in his seat. Emily packed up her things and walked over to Shane. He still held that blank expression on his face and only made eye contact with her when she was facing him. Emily couldn't tell if Shane hated her or not. Shane sighed and got up from his desk. He walked out of the classroom and waited for Emily to catch up. Emily found him annoying. She wished she could follow someone else. Where was Sam? She had never missed her sister this much before. Emily let out a breath and said, "What is our next class?" This time Shane raised an eyebrow, which was the first sign of emotion. Emily was slightly pleased with herself for making Shane do this. It was the first step in seeing his true feelings towards her. Emily hoped he would open later on in the year and not be so boring. "Why do you always ask me this?" asked Shane. Emily rolled her eyes at him, feeling quite annoyed. She had already told him she had dyslexia. Was he making fun of her? Why couldn't he just answer her question? "I told you I have dyslexia," said Emily. Shane sighed and placed one arm against the wall and leaned on it. They stared at each other, waiting for one person to answer the other. Emily glared at him while Shane stared with a blank face again. Why was it so hard for him to show emotion? Shane cleared his throat and said, "All right then. Let me see your schedule." Emily gave him her schedule without hesitation. She stared at him as he read it, waiting for him to tell her what her next schedule was. He gave her back the schedule and said, "You have physics before lunch. I don't have that class, but I'll show you where it is." Emily nodded in agreement and followed him to physics. He led her up 2 staircases and brought to the first room on the 2nd floor. When she entered the room, he left without another word. Emily wasn't too much disappointed because he needed to get to his class. However, even though he annoyed the crap out of her, she did feel lonely without him. She walked to the front of the desk and introduced herself to the teacher. The teacher in the front had brown hair, blue eyes, and tanned skin. Her nails were decorated with pink nail polish, and she wore red lipstick as well as some light eyeshadow. "What's your name?" asked the teacher. "I'm Emily." "Hello, Emily. I'm Mrs. Johnson. Please take a seat next to Lucy." She pointed to a girl with black short hair and blue eyes. Before she sat down, Mrs. Johnson handed her a physics textbook. Emily sat down next to Lucy and Mrs. Johnson started the lecture. Emily walked outside the math classroom and smiled when she saw Shane waiting for her outside of the classroom. Although he did not show any expression, she was happy to see him. He was leaning against the wall with his foot propped up against it. He had his arms crossed as Emily approached him. "Ready for lunch?" asked Emily. Emily nodded and he led her downstairs and inside the lunchroom. They did not speak even when they got their hot lunch and sat down at a table in the cafeteria. Emily ate her turkey sandwich in awkward silence. She did not know what to say to him. She was the type of person who needed someone else to start the conversation. She was a horrible conversation starter. Shane played with his food and only took 1 bite of his sandwich during lunch. Every 5 minutes he would stare out the window as if watching something outside. The school bell rang, and Shane dumped his food in the trash bin and quickly walked outside. After Emily put away her lunch tray, she ran the direction where Shane was running. He was faster than she was. Most people were. By the time she caught up to him, she bumped into Shane when he stopped near the restrooms. Emily sighed and began to blush. She felt embarrassed about running into him. Maybe he didn't mind because he was not questioning why she ran into him. "Let's see what your next class is, shall W?" asked Shane. Emily nodded and gave him the paper. As he was scanning it, Emily said, "You didn't eat." Shane handed her the paper and said, "Your next class is history. Luckily, I have that class." Shane turned around on his heels and said, "Follow me." He walked to a classroom that was right next to the lunchroom. Emily entered the classroom and introduced herself to the teacher. Emily couldn't help but blush when she saw him. He seemed to be in his mid-20s. He was casually dressed, black and white flannel with red high tops. He had red hair, blue eyes, and pale skin. Though he had ginger hair, he had no freckles. "My name is Mr. Williams." "What is your name?" asked Mr. Williams in a British accent. Her heart jumped while he spoke. She was sure history would be her favorite class. Emily gave a shy smile and said, "I'm Emily." "Pleasure to meet you, Emily. Please take a seat next to Shane." Emily was very thankful she was finally going to sit next to someone she knew. Emily walked over to Shane. His face suddenly turned to a frown, and his breathing began to quicken. Emily wondered what was wrong with him, and looked ahead at Mr. Williams, who was pulling out a textbook from his desk. He walked over to her and gave her the book. While Mr. Williams spoke, Shane stared at her every 10 minutes. She wished she could move to a different seat, but she knew there was no other empty seat. Plus, Shane was the only person she knew from her class, so she felt slightly more comfortable about that. However, she was very confused with him and wished he would be clear. Another hour went by, and she knew there were only 2 classes left until the school day would finally end. Shane waited until Emily was ready to go, and then rushed out of the class. Emily followed him, and when she caught up to him, she said, "What's my next class?" Shane groaned and snatched the schedule when Emily pulled it out. It wasn't her fault that she couldn't read. She needed help around the school. If she tried to read on her own, it would take her an hour just to read 1 page. It was very difficult for her, and she hated asking people for help, but she had no choice. The easiest class of the day, study hall. They walked outside the school building and sat down at a table. When the school bell rang, Eric and a group of teenagers came outside. They sat down at a table across from Shane and Emily and began to mess around. 2 of them teenagers threw a football while some of them did homework. Shane grunted when a crumpled-up piece of paper was thrown at his head. The boys laughed and walked over to their table. Emily kept her head down and attempted to do her work. However, it was hard to focus on the words when there were distractions around. Suddenly, Eric pulled Shane from the table and said, "Want to join football, Shane? You would make a great water boy." They all laughed as they mocked Shane. Then a few girls walked over and sat down next to Emily. They played with her hair as she did her work. Emily slammed her hand down when one of the girls took her notebook and threw it on the ground. When Emily turned her head to look at them, she recognized them both. They were Lucy and Ginger, the girls she sat next to during her classes. "I hear you are now dating Shane," said Ginger. Emily shook her head and said, "No, we just met." Ginger laughed and said, "Really? Then why were you 2 walking around with each other all day?" Emily fidgeted with her pen and looked down at the table. Why couldn't they just leave her alone? Why did people always hate her because she was different? She wished she could just be normal, but Emily knew that would never happen. Ginger chuckled and said, "Couldn't find them yourself?" This might be strike 2, thought Emily. She quickly thought of something and said, "It's a big school." "Good point." I'll slide for now," said Ginger. The girls laughed and walked away from the table. Emily sighed in relief, but when she looked at Shane, the boys were still taunting him. Emily glared at them and stood up from the table. Why wasn't Shane defending himself? He allowed them to make fun of him. Shane wasn't doing anything to help himself escape from the problem. Emily walked over to the boys and said, "Let him go. He did nothing to you." Eric turned his head to her and held a smirk on his face. "And how do you know that, little girl?" Emily rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. She was not going to let Eric bully her or Shane. "First off, I am not little. I am 14. Please let him go." Eric looked at Shane and said, "Are you really going to let a girl defend for you right now? That is just pathetic." Emily attempted to pull them apart, but Eric was stronger than her. He pushed her to the ground and then shoved Shane against the wall. This time Shane tried to get away from him, but it was no use. "Emily!" Emily turned her head when she heard a familiar voice call her name. She let out a breath when she saw Sam running up to her. She pulled her up from the ground and slapped Eric across the face. Eric let go of Shane from the shock of Sam slapping him on the face. Eric looked like he was going to hit her back until he got a full look of her. A smile came across his face, and he held out his hand. Sam rolled her eyes, stomped on his foot, and walked away with Emily. Emily felt embarrassed, but she was glad Sam came just in time to help her out. She was kind of happy that Sam slapped Eric. He deserved it. "Emily, what were you thinking?" asked Sam. "I don't know. I guess I wasn't thinking." Sam nodded and said, clearly, "You can't just do that, Emily. You're not strong enough to pick a fight with someone. Emily started to argue with Sam when they walked inside. I was just trying to help Shane. Yes, I am aware of that, but those boys are twice your size. You should know better. Sam took her to the last class of the day, which was art. When they entered the classroom, Sam said, "Meet me by the front doors as soon as you're done. The dark-haired boy might want to start a fight." Emily nodded, and Sam left. Emily looked around the room for an empty seat and found one in the back corner. 10 minutes later, a chubby man came in and said, "Welcome to art. I hear a new student has come to the school. Please stand up and introduce yourself." Emily's voice shook as she spoke. Everyone's eyes were now on hers while she tried to tell a little bit about herself. She told them her name and age and who her sister was. However, she left out the part how she had dyslexia. The teacher nodded when she sat back down. "I am Mr. Erickson. I hope you enjoy your time here." Emily looked around the room, wondering if Eric was going to be there. By the time class was halfway done, he still wasn't there. She was very thankful about that. She assumed this was going to be the only class where she was safe from Eric. Listening to Sister's demand, she quickly ran out of the classroom and to the front doors. Of course, like Sam suspected, Eric was talking with her. Emily crossed her arms, feeling quite angry. Sam looked annoyed as Eric spoke with her. Emily hadn't seen Sam this annoyed in a long time. She slowly walked over to Sam and stood next to her quietly. Sam looked at Emily and said to Eric, "I have to go, Eric. Our mom is here." Eric laughed and took Sam's arm. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong. Eric pulled out a pen and began to scribble on Sam's arm. Sam looked like she was having a heart attack. Emily glared at Eric while he was writing stuff on her sister's arm. She felt like punching Eric in the face for writing on her sister. He was a sick person, and she wanted him to go away. Once Eric was finished, Sam pulled her arm back, grabbed Emily's hand, and walked out of the school where their mom was waiting in the parking lot. Sam pulled open the car door and Emily slid in while Sam got in the front. Anna started the car and they drove out of the parking lot. Anna looked furious while she drove the girls home. Emily wondered why and assumed it was because of something at work. She did not know why she was so mad. Emily stared out the window and was silent the entire car ride. However, the mention of Eric caught Emily's attention. Why did Eric always make everyone so stressed out? It was really annoying, and she wished he would just stay out of her life. Emily saw Sam pull up her sleeve and showed Anna the numbers. Anna nearly stopped the car and pulled over on the side of the road. Clearly, she was not happy about the whole Eric situation. "So let me get this straight. You tried pulling away and he didn't let go, and he pushed Emily?" asked Anna. She was almost shouting when she was speaking. No one was happy about the whole Eric situation. Eric was upsetting them and making everyone angry. Why couldn't he just get out of their life? Sam nodded and said, "A group of boys were bullying someone, so Em tried to stop them. However, that creep pushed her to the ground." Anna shook her head and pulled up into the driveway of their house. "That is not okay. Why haven't your teachers done anything?" Sam shrugged her shoulders and said, "We're new at the school. They wouldn't believe us." Anna got out of the car and walked over to the trunk. She pulled it open and grabbed some grocery bags and walked inside. Sam opened the door for Anna and followed her inside. As they walked inside the house, Emily heard voices in her head again. She gasped and stopped in mid-step as she entered the house. Why did she keep hearing voices? Did anyone else hear anything, or was it just her? Sam looked at Emily and said, "Are you coming inside, or are you just going to stand in the doorway?" Emily nodded and walked inside. She felt her cheeks blushing as she closed the door behind her. Emily pulled herself up from bed and looked underneath her pillow, remembering the package she found earlier that day. She pulled out the package and wondered if she should open it. Emily ran her hands over the pack and fiddled with the brown paper that wrapped the object. While Emily looked at the package, she heard someone say her name. She looked up at the photograph above her bed. She could have sworn she saw the girl in the photo smiling. Emily shivered and looked away from the picture. She let out a breath and tore open the package. She couldn't help it. Emily was so curious about it, and she figured if no one claimed it, it was hers. Wasn't that the rule? Finders keepers? Emily smiled to herself when she found out it was a journal. She noticed there were 2 gold initials on the cover of the journal, ND. She wondered what the full name was and why it was on the journal in the first place. Emily could have sworn she saw the letters on something else. She shrugged and decided to open the journal. Emily looked at the first page and slowly read the journal. It took her at least 30 minutes to get through the first page. As she flipped through the pages, she saw 3 reoccurring symbols: the David star, a crescent moon, and a leaf. She wondered why those symbols always showed up in the journal. Emily looked at the clock on her bedside table and figured it was probably time to go to bed. She closed the journal, put it under her pillow, and laid back down. When Emily's teachers at her old school found out she had dyslexia, only a few of them helped her. During quizzes and tests, she would tell the teachers her answers, and they would say whether or not it was correct. She felt humiliated when they found out, but was very thankful when they helped her with it. There was one teacher, however, who hated her and always made fun of her because she had dyslexia. That teacher absolutely hated her for some reason. Emily wished she knew why that teacher hated her, but she didn't. When some of Emily's teachers did help her, though, at first she objected their help. However, it did make it a lot easier for her in school, so she was happy that they did help her. Anna had suggested to do school online so that she could read Emily the homework, but Emily insisted on going to school. She would have gone insane if she were to be homeschooled. She needed to be around people. Emily sighed and closed her eyes. She needed sleep for tomorrow, and she was exhausted. Emily was determined to succeed in her new school, no matter what people told her otherwise. Emily groaned and pulled the covers over her head when she felt someone shake her away. She did not want to go to school today. She was so tired and needed more sleep. Why did they have to wake up so early? She wished she could sleep in till noon and stay at home. Emily hated doing homework and tests like every student. Emily wondered how late she stayed up last night. Sam laughed and pulled off the covers. Emily tried to shoo her away and placed the pillow on top of her head. "Why did Sam have to wake her up so early? Sam," Emily said, feeling very annoyed. Sam tickled her and Emily began to laugh. She was ticklish everywhere, so it was very easy to get her to do something if someone tickled her. "Get up, sleepyhead. You need to get ready for school. Mom has already made breakfast for us." Emily sighed and pulled herself up from bed. Not because she had to get up, but because she was very confused. Their mom hadn't made breakfast for them since their father left them. She wondered why Anna was just now starting or anything like that. She was just very confused. She also wondered what Anna had made for them. Sam walked out of the room, and Emily pulled on a blue t-shirt and black jeans. She slipped on her Converse and ran downstairs. Back in California, Sam was forced to drive Emily everywhere because Anna was depressed after Derek left them. The only time Anna came out of the room was for meals and work. Although now that Sam no longer had a car, Anna had to get up and drive them to school. When Emily walked downstairs, she smelled amazing food cooking in the oven. It smelled like pancakes and coffee. Emily did not drink coffee, however Sam and Anna did so. That was why they always had coffee every morning for breakfast. While they had coffee, Emily usually served herself either orange juice or milk. She liked both of them, however she preferred the orange juice with a little bit of pulp inside it. Most people found it weird that she liked the pulp, but she enjoyed it and did not care what others thought. Emily and Sam sat down at the kitchen table while Anna placed pancakes on their plates and handed it to them. Anna hummed as she gave them their plates and poured Sam coffee and Emily orange juice, the kind with the pulp. Emily and Sam raised eyebrows at each other, wondering why their mom was so happy. They both shrugged in response and began eating their breakfast. Even though this was unlike their mom, they were still happy they got pancakes. "Thanks, Mom," Sam and Emily said. Anna smiled and said, "You're welcome. I'm glad you guys like it." Emily and Sam continued eating while Anna hummed and sat down at the table with her breakfast. After Anna had taken a few bites and poured her coffee in a to-go mug, she checked her phone and said, "Crap, we're late. Emily, Sam, do you guys have everything?" Emily and Sam nodded and quickly finished their breakfast. Emily and Sam quickly ran upstairs and grabbed their backpacks. While Emily grabbed hers, though, she thought she heard someone laughing. Again, she looked up at the photograph and thought she saw the girl smiling again. That picture freaked her out. She should probably get rid of it once she gets home from school. Emily walked downstairs and found Sam and Anna already at the door. She ran to catch up with them. Anna started the car, and turned up the radio once they arrived. Emily and Sam were both so confused, but happy to have their mom be herself again. Emily got in the car and closed the door while Sam hopped in the front seat. Emily and Sam glanced at each other once more, wondering what was up with their mother. "You girls ready?" asked Anna. Emily and Sam nodded and said, "Ready." Anna pulled out of the driveway and cranked up the music. On their way to school, Anna got all of them donuts, coffee, and hot chocolate. While Katy Perry was on the radio, Anna sang at the top of her lungs like old times. Emily and Sam laughed while their mother sang. It was quite enjoyable to see their old mom back. They missed the happy side of her. Once they pulled up into the parking lot of the school, Sam kissed her mother and walked out of the car. Emily hugged Anna and walked outside the car. She dreaded doing work at school. However, the fact that her mom was happy again, it made her day a lot better. When Emily was about to get out of the car, Anna pulled her back in and said, "Don't go anywhere near that boy. Do you understand me?" Anna looked very serious when she said that. Emily wondered why she seemed so serious about not being near Shane. Emily tilted her head to the side and said, "What boy do you not want me to be around?" "Don't go anywhere near the boys you were with yesterday. Do you hear me, Emily? Don't be around them." Emily nodded and walked out of the car, not wanting to hear anything else. When she got out of the car, she thought she saw Shane and Eric walking towards the trash bin and then behind the bushes. She wondered what they were doing and wanted to find out. Emily looked back to make sure her mother was gone and followed them to their hiding spot. She hid behind the bushes and watched them, hoping to figure out what was going on. Emily watched as Eric stood over Shane. She wondered why Shane wasn't defending himself. He was clearly being bullied and he wasn't doing anything. Emily wanted to help him out, but she was not as strong as Eric was. If he pushed her again, she would not know what else to do other than to call for help or cry her way out. She had a way to do that with people. Sometimes she was able to guilt-trip people into doing things for her. Maybe she would do that on Eric if the opportunity came. "What do you want, Eric? You always do this to my kind," said Shane. Emily wondered what he meant by his kind. It was strange the way they talked. It was like they were from another century, and unfamiliar with this one. Emily leaned in closer to hear what they were saying. Eric pointed a finger at him and said, "You're a bad blood. Admit it." Bad blood? What the heck was a bad blood? Thought Emily. Sean stuffed his hands in his jean pockets and looked towards the bushes. Emily sucked in her breath, wondering if he knew she was there. She hoped they didn't know. Her mother would kill her if she found out she was near Eric and Shane. Why did her mother tell her not to be near them? People would say that she was being a protective mother. However, Emily had a feeling that there was something more to it. It was the tone of her voice that made her think it was something else. The worry and fear hidden in her voice, her eyes growing wider by the minute. It had to be more than just a mother being protective of her daughter. "I won't admit anything, Eric," said Shane. Eric glared down at him and crossed his arms. Emily laughed when she saw him acting like a child not getting his way. It was quite funny, actually. Eric seemed stubborn and disobedient like most children. Shane looked at the bushes again, and Emily covered her mouth to make her stop laughing. Her heart beat faster as Shane walked closer to her. She wondered what he was going to do. For some reason, though, she could not make herself run away and go to class. She has had to see what was going to happen. Shane looked at Eric and said, "I will tell you one thing, though. I know something that you don't." Emily began to back away, not wanting to be found. She looked at Eric, who seemed to be confused for once. A smirk began to form on his face while he spoke. "And what is that, Shane? What do you know that I don't?" Shane looked back at Emily and said, "Someone is watching us." Both of their heads turned to Emily. The school bell rang, and Emily quickly ran inside before they could catch her. Emily ran inside freaking out about what had just happened. They knew she was there. She needed to get to her class as soon as possible before they found her. If her mom found out, she would probably ground Emily from seeing anyone or even going to school. Anna would probably make her do online school if she found out what Emily did. When she realized that she did not quite remember what her first class was, she walked into the office and says, "What is my first class?" A lady with her hair up in a ponytail looked up at her and asked, "Are you new here?" Emily realized she had a strong New York accent. So did everyone else she met. Her and Sam seemed to be the only ones without New York accents. Emily nodded in response. The lady sighed and pulled open a document on her computer. She looked at Emily and said, "What is your name?" "I'm Emily Dunn," she said. The lady nodded and scrolled down the Word document. She looked at her name and said, "You have English." Emily thanked the lady and quickly walked out the door. While she was walking to her class, she did not notice someone walking past her until she had bumped into them. The boy grabbed her arms and stopped her from walk forward. Emily pulled back and said, "Watch where you're going." The boy who she bumped into had brown, curly hair and green eyes and white skin. He raised an eyebrow at her and crossed his arms. Emily blushed, realizing what she had said. Emily twirled her hair with her fingers nervously. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you owned the halls," said the boy, raising his hand sarcastically. Emily's face began to burn with humiliation. The boy's face lit up with a smile. He playfully elbowed her and said, "I'm just teasing you." Emily attempted to laugh at his comment. She still felt embarrassed, though. She always took things way too seriously. She could never take a joke. Most of the time, jokes would offend her even though the person wouldn't mean to. "I'm John," he said while holding out his hand. Emily pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and shook his hand. His hand, she noticed, had calluses on it. They were very delicate when he shook her hand, like it was a piece of glass that could easily break. Emily blushed when they released each other's hands. She stared into his beautiful green eyes. She noticed a hint of silver behind his green eyes. Emily decided to push it aside since it could be the lighting. "Nice to meet you, Emily," he said. John smiled at her and said, "Where are you from?" Emily laughed nervously and said, "I'm from California." "That would make sense because you don't have a New York accent. I just couldn't tell what part of America you are from." They both laughed after John spoke. So far, John had been the nicest person she had met. Emily might actually enjoy it in New York. She missed Noah from California, but she was glad she found someone nice and enjoyable to be around. John grinned at her and said, "So, what's your first class?" English with Mr. Blake." John nodded and stepped to the side of her. He held his arm out and said, "Shall we head to English?" Emily blushed and held his arm with her hand. She was very grateful that he was in her class. Now she wouldn't have to be there with Eric. She was scared of Eric because of what he had done to him and her sister. She wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. However, that was kind of impossible because they both go to the same school and have the same classes. When she grabbed John's arm, she noticed that it felt unnaturally warm. Maybe it was because of the hair on his arm, though she wasn't quite sure why it seemed hotter than most people's skin. John led her to the English classroom, and when they entered, the class laughed. Emily could feel her cheeks burn as she walked in. Her heart skipped a beat when they all turned their heads to look at them. Emily let go of John's arm, and he sat down in his seat in the back of the classroom. Mr. Blake rolled his eyes and said, "Settle down, class." He turned to Emily and said, "I am sure you have a very good explanation for being late." Emily nodded and said, "I couldn't remember my first class." Mr. Blake sighed and faced John. "And what about you?" "I was helping her find her class," he said. Mr. Blake sighed and said, "Emily, take a seat. I will excuse you both. Next time it will be a detention." Emily nodded and sat down in an empty seat in front of John. She looked back at him and thanked him for helping her. He winked at her, and when he did, her heart skipped a beat. Emily turned back around and tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. She hadn't really had a crush on anyone before. Emily knew she had feelings for John even though they just met. She just felt so comfortable around him, and it was easy to talk to him. Unlike Shane and Eric, where it was just awkward. She wished it wouldn't have to be this awkward, but she knew that would never happen. Emily started thinking about Noah again. She wondered how he was doing. Was he lonely? Was he doing okay? Emily wished she could see him again. Maybe they could see him in the summer. Noah was always so kind to her. From the beginning of their friendship, he was at her side. They always sat at the lunch table together and helped with each other's homework. Emily hoped she would see him soon, and that everything was still the same. Up until lunch, John walked with Emily and showed her to her classes. She was quite thankful she accidentally bumped into him. He was extremely nice to her. He held the door open and led her to her classes. If Emily had found John, she'd probably be late every single day. Her mother would be pleased that she was hanging out with John rather than Eric or Shane. Emily walked into the lunchroom after John left to get hot lunch. She looked around the cafeteria, wondering where her sister could be. She also wondered if Eric or Shane was at school after what had happened in the morning. She was kind of scared to see them after that. Emily wanted to try to avoid them as much as possible. They scared her, and she did not want to feel afraid every minute of every second of the day. Luckily, Emily did not see either of them in the cafeteria. Emily sat down at an empty lunch table and opened up her lunch bag. Inside the bag, she found a ham and cheese sandwich with an orange and chips. She smiled to herself and took a bite out of the sandwich. John came to the table a few minutes later and began to eat his lunch. Emily blushed when he sat down and continued to eat her sandwich. She began to wonder where her sister was and stopped eating. She looked around the cafeteria. Emily frowned when she couldn't find Sam. John raised an eyebrow at her and said, "Are you okay?" Emily nodded and said, "I'm fine. I just need to find my sister." Emily got up from the table and began to look around for Sam. It did not take long for her to find Sam, unfortunately, though she wasn't alone. Eric was with her. She wanted to gag when she saw the two of them together. Emily hated the way he treated her and her sister. He was just a horrible person and does not deserve Sam. Why did he even try to get together with her? He should have known that Sam was not ever in a million to get together with him. Emily slowly walked over to Sam and Eric. She did not want to get caught by either Sam or Eric. If Sam caught her sneaking up behind her, she would get angry with her. But if Eric caught her sneaking behind them, who knows what he would do to her. Emily quietly sat down at the table they were at once she arrived. Once Emily sat down, she looked behind her and saw John walking towards her. He held up her hand, telling him to stand back. Emily turned back around and listened to what Eric and Sam were talking about. Emily realized that she couldn't tell how old Eric was. She saw him in all of her classes, but he seemed to be older than 14 or 15. He looked like he was 18 and ready for college. Not high school, and especially not 9th grade. The one question was, though, why would he be flirting with Sam? It was quite strange that he was flirting with her. Eric leaned in closer to Sam and touched Sam's hand resting on the table. Sam yanked her hand back and scooted away from him. Why couldn't Sam just run away? It would have been a lot easier for her to run away from Eric, rather than let him flirt with her. Emily wanted to know why she allowed it. Did she like having Eric flirt with her? Emily shivered at the thought and continued to listen to their conversation. Eric held a smirk on his face while he was talking with her. Sam looked disgusted when he was talking to her. Emily could tell that she was getting uncomfortable. "Go away, Eric," said Sam. Sam was getting angry now. Emily had never seen Sam so angry before. Eric laughed and grabbed onto her arm. Sam tried to pull away from his grip, but he was too strong. Emily wished she could do something to help Sam out in some way. But she knew that Eric would probably try to kill her if she did that. Emily looked back at John, who seemed to be ready to attack. He had his hands and fists at his side, and he held an angry glare on his face. She could have sworn, just like earlier, that she saw silver flash in his eyes. Emily tilted her head to the side in confusion. John stepped forward, ready to pounce if the time came. She shook her head and looked back at Sam and Eric. "I know you want to date me. Just admit it," said Eric. He had the flirtatious voice, but Sam did not fall for it. She was not the type of girl to flirt with every boy she saw. She was independent, and she liked it that way. Eric gripped onto her arm tighter, and Sam winced. Sam's breathing began to quick while Eric grabbed onto her. Eric threw his head back and laughed. Then he said, "I know you want to. Why else would I give you my number?" Sam glared at him and said, "You pushed my sister, freak. Why would I ever want to date you?" Eric growled and threw her arms back in frustration. Sam gasped but did not move from her seat. Emily, she would just walk away. She wondered why Sam wouldn't do that. Just like John, Emily thought she saw a hint of gold behind Eric's blue eyes. Sam looked back, and her eyes immediately grew wide when she saw Emily. Emily smiled shyly at her feeling slightly guilty about spying on them. Sam groaned and got up from her seat. Emily was happy that Sam finally got up, but she was kind of nervous how she was going to react to Emily spying on them. Sam grabbed Emily's hand and they both walked out of the cafeteria. Sam walked quickly out of the cafeteria and said, "What is wrong with that boy? Why would he think treating girls like that is okay?" "It is not okay!" Sam gripped onto Emily's hand as they walked into the office. Sam's eyes were set on the lady at the desk. Her eyes did not look away from the lady. Sam had a set mission, and once she had a decision, she would stick to that decision. The lady at the desk did not look up at the girls when they entered the office. Emily gasped when Sam slammed her hand on the desk. The lady looked up from her computer and blinked twice in confusion. She sighed and looked very annoyed for some reason. "Can I help you, miss?" Sam nodded and said, "I need you to call our mother. Whether you like it or not, we are going home." Emily looked at Sam in shock. She had never seen Sam like this before. Although, when they were in California, she had never been to school with Sam before, so she wouldn't know how she acted. Sam was 3 years older than her, so this would be the first and the last time they would be at school together. The lady raised an eyebrow at her and said, "That is not a way to speak to adults like that, Samantha Dunn." Sam didn't back down. She just became angrier. Sam's cheeks flushed red when she spoke. However, she spoke without fear. "Doesn't matter. I need you to call Anna Dunn. If you won't, I will." The lady sighed and picked up the office phone. Sam gave her Anna's phone number and the phone began to ring. 5 minutes later, the lady began talking angrily with Anna. Sam watched the lady while she spoke. She did not take her eyes off of her the entire time. Emily knew not to piss off Sam, otherwise she would get mad and no one would want to see her that way. It was actually kind of a scary sight. The lady hung up the phone and said, "Your mother is on her way. Good luck on the ride home." Sam rolled her eyes and walked out of the office with Emily. They walked outside the building in complete silence. Emily noticed some people staring at them when they walked out of the school. Emily caught a glimpse of Shane staring at her when they walked out. She noticed something different about him as they stared at each other. Just like Eric and John, she had a hint of red behind his eyes. Emily stopped walking, which made Sam almost trip over her feet. She turned around and glared at Emily. "What the heck, Em? Mom's on her way," said Sam. Emily looked over her shoulder but saw that Shane was gone. She frowned and said, "Nothing." They walked outside and found their mother waiting in the school parking lot. Emily avoided any eye contact with Anna. She felt so embarrassed even though she did nothing. Sam opened the car door and hopped in the front seat. Emily climbed in the back and closed the door. Anna drove away. Emily thought she saw Shane outside staring at her. Emily's heart skipped a beat and she looked the opposite direction. "Sam, why did the office call me in the middle of work?" asked Anna angrily. Sam explained to her everything that had happened during lunch. While Sam and Anna were talking, Emily heard voices in her head again. She looked around, wondering who kept on saying her name. She glanced down at her backpack and unzipped it. Emily tilted her head to the side and wondered how the journal got inside it in the first place. She did not remember taking it to school with her. Emily shrugged her shoulders and pulled out the journal. She began flipping through pages and stopped on one page that had the 3 symbols: the David star, leaf, and crescent moon. Emily narrowed her eyes and focused on each word on the page. It talked about vampires, werewolves, and fairies at war against each other, and the symbols identified each one of them. If someone were to saw any of the symbols on a person, they should assume that they are a vampire, werewolf, or fairy. Emily shook her head and closed the book. That was all nonsense. It was ridiculous. How would vampires, werewolves, and fairies even exist? That would be impossible. Emily sighed and held the book in her lap. For some reason, she does not want to put it away. She did not know why. With dyslexia, it made it hard for her to read. However, with tons of focus and no distractions, she was able to read some of the journal, and she was very proud about that. Emily looked up when she heard someone say her name. She was in another world until she was pulled out of it. "What was that?" asked Emily, very confused. Anna and Sam looked at each other. Anna sighed and asked, "Are you okay with everything?" Emily shook her head. Of course she was not okay. Eric was a total pervert and a creep. He tried to flirt with Sam, and that was not okay. She did not want him to flirt with her sister anymore. She also did not want Eric to push her again. That was terrifying. She wouldn't know what to do if that happened again. She remembered what her father did when he got angry. He had major anger issues that he needed to deal with, although he never did deal with them. However, he did help Sam and Emily with issues at school. He knew how to deal with teachers very well and was able to convince them to do anything. It was quite impressive, actually, although he was scary when he got mad. Anna knew her husband Derek had anger issues. She was able to control him. Unfortunately, one day he became too physical. When he heard that a boy bullied Sam, he went straight to the school and hit him right in the jaw. The parents of the boy tried to call the police, but Derek attacked them. He yelled at them because he was angry that his daughter was bullied. The next day, no one ever heard from that family again. There were rumors saying that Derek killed the family. However, there was no proof to that. For the next couple of months, that was how their father dealt with things. Once he and Anna fought. They fought about moving to a different state, and then it was all too much. Emily remembered watching them fight. Sam wanted Emily to go to bed, but Emily couldn't help but watch. She saw Derek hit Anna. Anna had a huge bruise on her face the next day. When she woke up from that night, she did not find Derek was not in bed with her. During the summer of 2009, they said that Derek murdered a man. Anna cried and hid in her room for the rest of the day. They all wished something different could have happened that night, but they all knew nothing would be the same again. Emily thought that Eric was a lot like her father. It was strange and creepy in a way, but he just reminded her of Derek. Anna pulled into the parking lot of a restaurant and parked the car. Emily wondered why they were at a restaurant. Sam opened the door for Emily. She hopped out of the car and walked next to Anna and asked, "Why are we at a restaurant?" Anna sighed and said, "I have to meet my literary agent, Rose Parks. I figured you two wouldn't mind some pizza while I discuss everything with her. Plus, I am late." Anna hurried them inside and walked over to a chubby woman with wavy brown hair and dark skin. Sam pulled Emily in line and said, "Mom gave us $20. What would you like?" "I don't know about you, but I'm in the mood for some pepperoni pizza."